Gotham City is widely considered to be one of the most corrupt and crime-ridden places in the world. A city where police take backhanders and officials plunder public funds is ultimately what led to the criminal chaos that claimed Thomas and Martha Wayne's lives and created Batman. If there were a competent and capable police force in place, then Gotham wouldn't need someone like Batman to intervene. However, when the seminal Batman the Animated Series was released in 1992, this aspect of the legend of Batman was massively toned down. Sure, there were hints at corruption. Remember how Harvey Dent went into a rage because Rupert Thorne's men, who had been caught red-handed with stolen military weapons, were released by a judge on a technicality, which Dent attributed to a bribe. Similarly, there are cases where vital evidence went missing from the police evidence room. The implication was that there were dishonest figures operating in the shadows, but they were rarely seen. You may find yourself wondering how such a vital component of Batman stories can be missing from what so many people consider to be the definitive version of Batman. And the simple answer is that it was originally there, but it was deemed to be too controversial for a children's cartoon. The thing is that no on-screen version of Batman had overt systemic corruption. Not the Adam West Batman show from the 1960s, the Super Friends, the Adventures of Batman, or the New Adventures of Batman. Even Tim Burton's Batman film only really had one cop on the take, Lieutenant Eckhart. However, if we look back at BTAS's original writer's bible for the series, we can see in Commissioner Gordon's segment that police corruption was going to play a major role in the series. James Gordon was appointed to the role of Commissioner because a former unscrupulous mayor promoted him in the hope of making him more amenable to taking bribes and looking the other way. However, Gordon turned up on the first day of his new role wearing his patrolman uniform, indicating that he was not one of them and that under his watch, things were gonna change. This was never referenced in the show, and a lot of the material in the writer's bible is obsolete. They described Killer Croc as a big game hunter that got bitten by an exotic reptile which transformed him into an alligator-like man, which is not the case in the show. But it's clear to see that fighting police dishonesty was originally part of the show's narrative. While they weren't allowed to show institutional corruption, they were able to get away with having one corrupt cop, as seen in the two-part story Shadow of the Bat. But before I get to him, I want to talk a bit more in depth about how BTAS adapted some deeply immoral figures of authority from the comics, because I find the little tweaks and adjustments they made quite fascinating, and how these changes impacted people's perception of these characters. The first big one to talk about is Rupert Thorne. In the comics, he was a city councilman, head of the Tobacconist Club, and orchestrator of shady deals that benefited the super rich in Gotham. Thorne was indirectly responsible for the creation of the villain Dr. Phosphorus when he screwed him over on a bad deal involving a nuclear power plant that went into meltdown. And he spent much of his time attempting to orchestrate the downfall of Commissioner Gordon and Batman with his flunkies Peter Pauling and Hamilton Hill, who I will get to in just a moment. In BTAS, however, Thorne was presented as a straight-up gangster, with no direct role in the city's running. I made a video about Rupert Thorne and how he was used as a substitute for the Mafia, so go watch that after this video if you want a more detailed breakdown. But this version of Thorne had a major role in the origin of Two-Face, and was the man that brought Bane to Gotham. BTAS's influence on how this character is perceived can be felt to this day, as Thorne appeared in James Gunn's Creature Commandos as a ruthless gangster. As for Thorne's collaborator Hamilton Hill, in the comic books he was deeply corrupt. His objective was to oust Commissioner Gordon and replace him with someone that was more open to looking the other way for the right people. Or should that be the wrong people? In BTAS, Hill was presented as a generally well-meaning but ultimately incompetent politician. During the episode Be a Clown, he briefly ran an anti-Batman campaign saying he was partially to blame for the state of Gotham. However, after Batman rescued his son Jordan from the Joker, he changed his tune. Hill's only real involvement with criminals was his indirect role in the events that ruined the life of Temple Fugit, the Clock King. Hill advised Fugit to change up his regular schedule and to try to relax more, which started a series of unfortunate events that ultimately cost him his livelihood. Interestingly, in the tie-in comic Batman The Adventures Continue, written by BTAS architects Paul Dini and Alan Burnett, Hill became the leader of the Court of Owls, a secret society that ran Gotham. The final comic book figure that appeared in BTAS that I want to highlight is Detective Harvey Bullock. In his first appearance, Commissioner Gordon identifies him as a dirty cop that he had fired, but he was reinstated by Hamilton Hill to be Gordon's assistant. Read Saboteur. While Bullock did try to get in Gordon and Batman's way, he saw the error of his ways after he unintentionally caused Gordon to have a heart attack. He may have wanted Gordon gone, but he didn't want him dead. In BTAS, Bullock is a rough around the edges cop that can be threatening and gruff, but ultimately he's a good detective and loyal ally of Gordon's. There were a wealth of other corrupt cops that the BTAS team could have pulled from the comics. Commissioner Loeb, Lieutenant Brendan, Detective Flass, and so on. But instead of doing that, they opted to make an entirely new character, Gil Mason. While Shadow of the Bat primarily served as the introduction of Batgirl, it also gave us the DCAU's only truly dirty cop in Gotham. Mason was presented as a gang-busting Elliot Ness type, tearing his way through the organised crime families of Gotham and bringing them to justice. Where other cops had tried to bring in people like Rupert Thorne, they always found a loophole that allowed them to evade punishment. But not this time. Mason always seemed to know exactly the right place to be and when to be there in order to catch the criminals red-handed. He made loud proclamations on the news, stating that he was determined to clean up Gotham once and for all, and that criminals were on notice. He was gunning for them. So I think the reason why they chose to make an entirely new character is that they didn't want fans of the comics to immediately see the twist coming. Mason was not a virtuous officer. He was a stooge of Harvey Dent. Or should I say Two-Face. If the episode had starred rising super cop Arnold Flass, I think many of us would have been suspicious. Two-Face used his position in the underworld to gather information about the heads of the crime families and their operations, passing it on to Mason so that he could swoop in and arrest them. This would leave a power vacuum, one that Two-Face would occupy. Meanwhile, as Mason's profile increased, he would be positioned to take over the GCPD as commissioner, giving Two-Face direct control of both the underworld and law enforcement. This scheme is actually pretty in keeping with Dent's original mission of capturing Rupert Thorne and getting his men off the streets. It was this crusade that ended up unravelling Dent's life and giving birth to Two-Face. Although it is ironic that Two-Face ended up fulfilling a similar role to the comic book version of Rupert Thorne. A key thing to note is that Two-Face had the same goal as Harvey Dent, at least during the initial BTAS era. He wasn't a generic bank robber or a crazy costumed person with a mad agenda. Everything he did was done with the aim of taking down organised crime. It's just that he knew that he couldn't completely eradicate it. There would always have to be someone in control. So he thought, why shouldn't it be him? Similarly, he knew that Gordon was too righteous to allow him to do this, so he needed to get Gordon out of the way and put one of his own people in charge. Using his combined knowledge from his time as district attorney and as a crime boss, Two-Face fabricated evidence to suggest that Commissioner Gordon had been on the take for years, accepting bribes from Rupert Thorne and funneling the money into a secret offshore bank account, and he sent Mason to bring him in along with the press. It's a very striking image, the old guard, now exposed as a fraud, being led away in shackles by the bright new shining star of the Force. Mason really is an utterly odious leech that only cares about furthering his own agenda. He presents himself as this bright beacon of lawfulness, but in reality he's a two-faced loser. As Gordon notes, at least you can see Dent's two faces. A disturbing element is how Mason tries to worm his way into the Gordon family by having a will they won't they romance with Barbara Gordon. Barbara seems to be interested in Mason, at least initially, and sees him as an ally in proving her father's innocence, but she quickly realises that he can't be trusted. Barbara arranges for a rally to be held in support of Gordon. After all he's done for the city, at the very least he deserves bail. But Mason repurposed the rally for his own ends. Two-Face's men arranged to take shots at Mason, making it seem like there had been an attempt on his life. But keen viewers noticed that Mason ducked before the guns were fired. He played his hand too early and caught the attention of Robin. Barbara, meanwhile, had attended the rally dressed as Batman because she believed that his endorsement would turn public opinion. Batman, meanwhile, was too busy trying to find who had set Gordon up. Barbara intervened and, in the commotion, was caught on camera with the press dubbing her Batgirl. With Batgirl and Robin working the case, it didn't take them long to catch Mason with his benefactor, and the whole thing fell apart. Mason presented himself as a fair, honest person, but in reality he was lecherous, dishonest, and completely disloyal. He tries to argue his case to Gordon, stating that he likes and respects him, but he has to take his opportunities where he can get them. He has loftier ambitions than the GCPD. He plans on becoming mayor at the next election. I thought it was really very interesting how quickly Two-Face and Mason went from disgracing Jim Gordon to just deciding to murder him. They break him out of prison, making sure that one of their men loudly proclaims that this escape was being carried out at the behest of Rupert Thorne, thus convincing people of Gordon's guilt. Mason isn't a fighter though. When Batman, Robin and Batgirl turn up, his instinct is to run away. Say what you will about Two-Face, but at least he's not afraid to fight. Batgirl pursued Mason, and in their scuffle she was unmasked. Mason tries to excuse his behaviour, saying that he didn't know that she was Batgirl, and Barbara pointedly asks if it would have made a difference, before kicking him in the chin. Conveniently, Mason fell and hit his head, leaving him in a coma from which he never awoke. He was still charged even in his unconscious state. While the censors wouldn't allow Mason to be killed, the fact that he was permanently unconscious, it's practically the same thing to all intents and purposes. And that's how these strict broadcast standards and practices people allowed kiddies to have their faith in the system undermined. Gil Mason didn't succeed in his attempted takeover of Gotham, and Two-Face was sent to Arkham, leaving a power vacuum. They never explicitly state this, but I would imagine that any case Gil Mason was the lead on would have been thrown out of court, which explains how Rupert Thorne was back in business in later episodes. In the end, Gil Mason is a symptom of the very disease Batman was created to fight, a handsome face masking a festering system. But unlike the comic books, where Gotham's institutions are often shown to be riddled with rot, the streets patrolled by crooked cops with compromised mayors and judges with blood on their gavels, Batman the Animated Series was forced to hold back. Characters like Bullock and Hill were softened, turned into rough-edged allies or well-meaning figureheads. Systemic corruption had to be implied, not shown. That's what makes Gil Mason noteworthy though. He's one of the few truly corrupt officials in the show, not just a pawn or a dupe, but an active architect of Gotham's decay. He doesn't just benefit from the system, he is the system, upgraded and polished, promising hope while laying the groundwork for hell. His story reminds us that in Gotham, the danger doesn't always come dressed as a clown or a crocodile. Sometimes it comes in a well-fitted suit armed with charm, ambition, and a 5-year plan. And that's why Batman has to exist. Not just to stop crime, but to see through the lies of men like Gil Mason. The ones who don't need an elaborate costume to play the villain. The most dangerous people of all. Okay, that's it for this week's essay. If you liked the video, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, tell all your friends about me. You know how YouTube works. If you really enjoyed the video and have the means, please consider making use of the thanks button to send a buck or two my way, because every little helps. I offer channel memberships for $1.99 a month. This will get you early access to my weekly video essay, priority responses to your comments, members-only videos, custom emojis, and an icon on your profile indicating that you're one of my people. And special thanks to my channel members. Everyone who was a member at the time of this video's creation is listed on the screen right now. If you want to see your name amongst all these wonderful people, join the channel now. Next time, I'll be back on Monday, where I'll return to the world of 2004's The Batman to shine the spotlight on a strong adaptation of one of Batman's D-list villains. We'll be talking about Firefly. Then next Friday, I'm going back to my latest Superman the Animated Series villain poll to talk about a poor, tragic figure that never wanted to be a villain. We're talking about Titano, the super ape. Hope to see you then.